Hello, my name is Franz Lanzinger. I'm an independent game developer, author, and musician. It's a real privilege and honor to talk at GDC. Today, we are going back in time to the early 80s. This talk is about my first video game, Crystal Castles. Crystal Castles is a coin-op game released by Atari in the summer of 1983. It's a trackball game where you're a bear and you pick up gems. Your nemesis is the evil witch Bertilda with her gem eaters, walking trees, and bees. The game is best known for the trimetric look of the 3D mazes and because it's the first arcade character game with a designed ending. Crystal Castles earned an estimated $100 million in quarters in the 1980s. The team that developed it was very small, just a few people, and the software and graphics fit into 56K bytes. It's about the size of an icon on an iPhone. Let's watch a video of Crystal Castle's basic gameplay. This video features Mark Alpiger, one of my biggest fans. At the top left is Bentley Bear picking up gems. The green things are the gem eaters. They try to eat the gems before you get to them. There's a swarm of bees and an evil bowling ball. If you get in trouble, you can jump. If you get to the last gem on the maze, you get a bonus. There it is, 3,700 points. This is the transition from level 7 to level 8. On this next maze, you try to clear the bottom area. But you don't have to get all the gems yourself because the gem eaters will help you. Good strategy is to go to the top area and then clear most of the top area. That's what Bentley is doing there. And you save a couple of gems and wait for the gem eaters to finish the bottom. There he goes. Now you get the last gem. So it's kind of interesting strategy sometimes. This next maze is called the cross maze because there's little crosses in the maze. It's all about timing your ride on the back elevator. The honey pot on top attracts the bees, and you want to not be up there with the bees because they will kill you. So there's the good timing. Now I can go up, get the honey pot. Oh, he missed the ride down, so he has to go back up, get the last one. Now he's got the magic hat. He's invincible for a little while. And I can finish it off getting the last few gems. The next maze has a really nice pattern where you get the honey pot first, and then the score comes down. The score is a real object with a collision attack, blocks the tree. That lets you go up the elevator without the tree getting to you. Thank you. Got ahead of myself there. Here's the highlights from today's talk. I'm going to play music from the game on my electronic piano live. It's my own keyboard right up on stage here. There's more video of advanced gameplay featuring Mark Alpiger, and he'll get to the very end of the game. There's some funny and historic videos from the arcades from the early 80s, and some rare scans of original sketches, documents, and some photos. Now, the first part of the talk is about the history of how Crystal Castles was made. I'll start with some personal background, how I got hired at Atari, and how the game was developed inside Atari coin-op. And I'll explain why the music is all classical music. I was born and raised in Innsbruck, Austria, where the city with all the Olympics. As a kid, I moved back and forth between the US and Austria several times and ended up in South Bend, Indiana. I went to the University of Notre Dame where I was a math major, and I knew I was going to be a mathematician, but I was also interested in learning how to program. Here's a scan from my very first programming project at Notre Dame. The code was written using the PL1 language. The project had to do with generating some ASCII art. Here's some output from my programming at Notre Dame. On the left is output from that project, my first project, and then on the right is my senior project in 1977. Even way back then, you can see that I was interested in doing hidden line removal. It was done by just drawing the objects back to front. That's the same idea used in Crystal Castles 6 years later. This is on. Okay. After college, I went to graduate school in mathematics at Berkeley, but dropped out to get a programming job at a company called Systems Control. And here's my favorite toy there, the Tektronix 4014 terminal. It's an analog vector storage tube terminal, and you could draw vectors on it in high resolution, but it was kind of like an expensive Etch-a-Sketch, because if you wanted to erase anything, you had to erase the entire screen, and that took about a second. Here's some graphics from the 4014 terminal. There was a week during my employment there where my boss was out of town, and so I thought I'd take advantage of this and work on a new way to display 3D graphics. When she came back, I proudly showed her my new creation, and well, let's say she wasn't impressed. It looked nice, but it wasn't my job to make the graphics look better. Now, here's some more scans of graphics from this side project. The code to display the graphics was written in the Fortran programming language, and the logic was very similar to the hidden line removal logic in Crystal Castles later on. After Systems Control, I worked at a startup company called Advanced Information and Decision Systems. The acronym was unfortunate, because 2 years later, the AIDS epidemic got its name. The company had to change its name, and they chose Advanced Decision Systems. The company specialized in contract AI research. Part of my work was to display 3D models of ships using Z80 assembly language. It's this assembly language experience that really helped me later on with my game programming at Atari. Meanwhile, in 1981, there was an arcade right next to my office called Time Zone. I went there every day to play pinball and video games. Coming up is a video excerpt from a 1981 documentary called Into the Valley of the Space Invaders. The entire documentary is available online if you search for it. It was filmed at the local Chuck E. Cheese, and I'm in this video for about 2 seconds, sort of by accident. This is before Atari. I had a beard back then, and I'm the second guy. There's 4 guys in this video with beards. I'm the second one.
You know, there's only one way to beat these guys. With a pocket full of these.
We are the invading force. No one can stop us, not even you.
Well, when you play the machine and you defeat it, you know, you get this feeling that's just, I don't know, there's not many feelings like it when you defeat a machine.
You've got that constant challenge. It's man against machine, a thinking machine.
It's a real sense of accomplishment.
It's just a good feeling to know that you're good at something.
Yeah, I'm hooked on them. You might say that.
Well, I play about 20 hours a day, actually. That's on a short day. Sometimes it's about 30 hours.
We divvy up the money equally, and then we all just play until the coins are all gone.
Honestly, if I could change the games in any way I possibly could, the thing that I'd most like to design in the games is a direct line from the coin chute into my pocket.
Thank you. That's an old VHS tape. There's some controversy. At the end, Lyle Rains has a billing as the asteroids designer, but it was actually designed by Ed Logg, who spoke here last year, and Lyle Rains. At the Time Zone Arcade, I met a really great group of arcade game players. If it weren't for those guys teaching me how to play arcade games, I wouldn't be talking to you here today. In 1981, we played a lot of Centipede. Eventually, several of us got to a point where we could play Centipede as long as we wanted. I was the only one crazy enough to play for 6 hours on 1/4. I sent in a score of 2,999,999 to Atari, and ended up with the world record, which held for 4 months. The last line of the slide lists some of the initials from the Mountain View Arcade Group. I used the initials for geometry in some of the mazes in Crystal Castles. In 1981, Atari put on the purported World Championship for Centipede. Eric Ginner, Sam Mehta, and I flew to Chicago to compete. Coming up is a video of the news coverage featuring Eric Ginner and Sam Mehta in the local news coverage at the end. I finished only 26th out of about 100 people, so I didn't make the news.
Today are the central component in the big business of video games. And this weekend in Chicago, there was a gathering that showed how the technology of the games is growing at a rate that parallels their phenomenal popularity. Jim Hickey reports.
This symphony of electronic noises is the music of money. Nearly $3 billion were stuffed into video games last year. Hundreds of new coin-operated games were unveiled at a trade fair in Chicago this past week. But the video games were clearly most popular, and now the most sophisticated. The technology is growing so rapidly that video engineers already have newer ideas that will make these machines obsolete.
We're only limited by our imagination and technology.
Frank Ballou is vice president of Atari, one of the major video game makers.
Anything that, I said, we believe that will captivate the player, that's what we're looking for.
Atari may have already found it. Last year's profits reportedly increased 5-fold. And this past weekend in Chicago, the company held what it called the World Video Game Championships, a promotional gimmick that drew contestants from across the country and even Canada. With $50,000 in cash and prizes, the competition was intense. The strategy?
I concentrate on everything that comes out, gives me points.
That's good enough to make Oak-Soo Han of California one of the top winners, beating everyone else, but never beating the game. For in the world of microchips, the machine never loses. Jim Hickey, ABC News, Chicago.
And that's our report. For ABC News, good night.
Video game addicts used to battling space invaders all day may see little green men dancing in their dreams at night. But a couple of Mountain View vid kids will also see greenbacks as well. After pouring thousands of quarters into slots of video games, the pair came back from a national tournament. The first and second place winners. Eric Ginner took first place.
It was pretty hard.
Anybody could do it, as long as you have a lot of practice. It's no big thing, as long as you have a lot of practice and play every day.
Eric Ginner is bringing home $12,000 in winnings. His friend and competitor, Sam Mehta, won $7,000. They predict a lot of that will disappear into game coin slots.
Right back into the slots again, so they'll get it all back.
They probably think they will.
That's our news. Thanks for being with us, and we'll look for you tomorrow.
And that's another old VHS recording. Sam actually bought a car with his winnings and crashed his car, so kind of. As you can imagine, my dream job was to work at Atari Coin-Op. Here's a partial list of games made by Atari Coin-Op over the years. It's a pretty impressive list, and the games were designed and developed by a very small group of people. In late 1981, I got an interview thanks to my arcade friend, Brian McGee, the guy with the initials BBM. Brian was hired a few months earlier, and he got his interview because he happened to be at the Golfland Arcade in Sunnyvale, where Atari was field testing something. During my interview, I was very nervous, but I talked with Mike Albaugh, the technical guru of Atari Coin-Op. The questions were mostly about assembly language. It also helped that I had set the Centipede world record just a few days before, I think it was. I started working at Atari on a Monday early in 1982. All the employees got an orientation handbook, which I still have. Here's the cover. And here's an excerpt from the mission statement in the handbook. Continue to lead in the home and coin-operated electronics entertainment fields and to become the leader in the personal home computer field. Well, it didn't quite turn out that way for Atari. Atari was just 2.5 years away from a complete collapse. But what's really odd about the mission statement is that there's no mention of games anywhere. You'd think the mission should have been to make good video games. Atari was huge in 1982. It had over 5,000 employees and grew even larger after that. I started at 1272 Barregas in Sunnyvale. Each one of those black squares is a building, an Atari building in Sunnyvale. Coin-op engineering was entirely inside the horseshoe-shaped building in the middle. There were about 200 people working in that one. In 1982, Atari Coin-op used the fourth language on a couple of games, but the rest were written in 6502 assembly language. All software development was done using a VAX timeshare system. This is before PCs. Everyone in Coin-op got a free Atari 800 computer, but the engineers mainly used those for playing games. There were one or two programmers per team, usually just one. There was a hardware engineer and a technician for designing and building the custom hardware, and a project leader. Development was based on milestones, and it took about a year per game, ranging anywhere from a few months to as long as 3 years. There were focus groups and field tests, and it was the field tests that really mattered. The work environment was incredible. Every engineer and programmer had a private office. There was a common lunchroom, and the engineers all had lunch together every day. I always looked forward to lunch in the big table, or at the big table with all the Atari Coin-op engineers. Middle management inside Coin-op was great. The notorious top management outside of Coin-op stayed away. Most of the work was done at the office. It wasn't practical to work at home back then. There were no set work hours. It was just the results that mattered. There were design documents, but they were just loose guidelines and often ignored. The phrase agile development was invented 20 years later, but that's exactly what was happening inside Coin-op. The traditional method of design first and then code just doesn't work when developing original games. You need to test frequently during development. In an arcade game, the quarter was the accepted way of paying for a game, and the goal for designers was to allow 3 minutes of game time per quarter on average. Games had to be easy to learn because there just wasn't enough time to teach anything complicated. And besides, most players were casual players back then. Aside from, I was a hardcore player, but most of them just wanted to have fun. The hard-to-master rule was needed so that people would keep coming back for more. My first goal at Atari was to learn the tools. I wrote some test code in Fortran because I didn't have a game development system during my first month, and I wanted to do something that maybe I could use later. I ended up using some of that code for generating the level data in Crystal Castles. I also needed to learn how to use the VAX and to learn 6502 assembly language. I'd like to take this opportunity to credit the team that worked on Crystal Castles. This was in the days when credits were not put into games just yet. Some of the people in these credits are here today. So if you could please stand up. I don't know if you can see me. There's Barbara Singh. And we have Susan McBride. And Scott Fuller. And John Ray. At the end of the talk, I'll ask them all to come up on the podium, and we'll take your questions as a group. Now, these guys don't know I did this. They saw an earlier version of the talk that didn't have these photos, so watch out. This is John Ray, team leader, and Scott Fuller, project leader, back in 1982 in their offices. That's Larry Bryan, who helped with music entry, and Paul Mancuso, a technician, also back in the 80s. That's a recent picture of Barbara Singh, and that's me wandering the halls of Atari. That's Susan McBride. Barbara Singh and Susan McBride did art on Crystal Castles. And Sam Lee, he was the hardware engineer who did the custom hardware on the game. This is Rusty Daw, who's also known as Bryson Daw. He wrote the music software that was used in Crystal Castles. And this is a group shot, a team picture from the Atari internal employee newspaper in 1983. I missed that day, and so did Paul, so it's not a complete picture, but you can maybe recognize some of these guys. The naming, getting back to the game, the naming history of Crystal Castles is this. First, it was called Cloners, then Toporoids, and finally Crystal Castles. Here's some original sketches made by me in February of 1982. Those sketches already look like Crystal Castles. This is the game I wanted to make, and I gave it the name Cloners, don't ask. It had trackball controls and a 3D playfield, and I thought I could get the project approved by drawing these sketches. But that was a problem. I'm just some new guy off the street, and to get management approval, it turned out to be easier to just pick a pre-approved project from the project book. So there was this big book of game ideas. I wonder where that is now. The game ideas were generated at off-site brainstorming sessions, which were held about once a year. The best ideas were written up and put into the book. Toporoids from the book basically puts asteroids and Tempest together. The controls were asteroids controls with shooting. The main character was a spaceship, and there were 3D playfields. Once the project got off the ground, we switched to raster hardware instead of vector. The screen resolution was a whopping 256 by 240, and the main characters was no longer a spaceship, but an alien who looked a lot like E.T. This is before any of us had seen E.T., by the way. Initially, all the art was what we called programmer art. That's where a programmer literally typed the numbers into his terminal to make the art, and of course, it didn't look very good. The assembly language code didn't look like assembly language. We had some really great macros that made the code look like a higher level language with if, then, else, and do loops rather than jumps and branches. We had good debugging tools, and compared to the 2600, the hardware was an order of magnitude more powerful, especially when it came to RAM and graphics power. Here's an old line printer listing from 1983. This is Crystal Castles code. It's kind of hard to see there, so we'll zoom in on some of the code on the next slide. This is our code walkthrough now. The variable names are limited to 6 characters, so they have to be abbreviations. I still remember some of these abbreviations. That en.jtl stands for enemy jump table. en.jtl is a lookup table used to make Bentley Bear jump. If you were to replace those numbers with larger ones, Bentley Bear would make higher jumps. The en.plu stands for enemy player update. That's the update function for the player called once a frame, just like in Unity today. Here's more code from that function. At the top, it loads the jump flag, and if it's set, then we load the jump delay, transfer it to the Y register, look up the current height from the jump table, and store it in the height offset. This is what my day was like, by the way. If the jump flag isn't set, then the height offset is set to 0. The jump table was also used for the bouncing hat. There are no comments in this code because I thought it was self-documenting. A few months in the project, it was clear that the game needed a better theme. The basic gameplay was there, but with programmer art. In just an hour or two, we decided on a fantasy theme with the main character a bear, the enemies an evil witch and gem eaters. The playfields are now castles, And the moving trees were inspired by the talking apple-throwing trees in The Wizard of Oz. That's the scene where Dorothy says we're not in Kansas anymore. Near the end of the project, we decided to have an internal contest for a new name of the bear. The original bear, name of the bear was Bear Braveheart, but someone in management thought that the name was politically incorrect. By the way, this is 12 years before Mel Gibson's movie Braveheart. The winner of the contest was Bentley Bear. I'm okay with the new name, but I still like Bear Braveheart better. Levels were made by writing code in Fortran, believe it or not. Things like draw a ramp at location 10.3 to the right with 5 steps up, or draw a hemisphere with radius 8. Here's the Doomsdome level. There is, which was made with Fortran calculating a perfect hemisphere. There's 1 bit of storage for the tunnel geometry. Tunnels were always flat inside, so that way I didn't have to store a separate height for the elevations inside the tunnel. That's because memory was kind of expensive back then. Crystal Castles is one of the first arcade games made at Atari with more than just a few notes of music. I have a large sheet music collection that I inherited from my grandfather. His name is also Franz. My grandfather was born in Vienna in 1896 and lived with my family when I was a little boy. I still remember hearing him play piano, and he's the reason I learned to play piano and to love classical music. Rusty Daw, you saw Rusty's picture earlier, wrote a brilliant piece of software that he called RPM, which stands for Rusty's Pokey Music System. It allowed you to type notes one at a time from a musical score, and I selected and arranged the music for the game on my piano at home. RPM was limited to 4 channels, so I dedicated one of those channels to sound effects, so that left 3 channels for music. Because of these restrictions, I looked for music that sounded good in 3-part harmony. Here's a summary of most of the music in the game. It all had to be in the public domain because there was no system in place yet for licensing music at Atari. I'll now be playing my own arrangement of the classical music in Crystal Castles. This is going to be a live performance on my electronic piano, not a recording. And the screen, my lovely wife will assist. Thank you, Susan. She will advance the slides to show you the current music that's playing. So here we go. Thank you very much.
35 minutes at normally back.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, I'll talk about the character art in Crystal Castles. It was produced using a custom in-house picture processing system, which we call the PPS. Often the artists would do paper sketches first. Here's a scan of some original character art by Barbara Singh. On the left is the Gem Eater, and on the right, a skeleton, a ghost, and the main character, Bentley Bear. The animations were done the old-fashioned way, one frame at a time. Here's more. On the left is Bertilda the Witch. The name is inspired by Matilda Avenue in downtown Sunnyvale. And on the right is the Bee Swarm and the Honey Pot by Susan McBride. In addition to the focus groups and the field tests, I thought it would be a good idea to have an in-house contest for the engineers. The purpose of the contest was to test the game and to get feedback and comments. Every contestant played Crystal Castles 3 times, and the best score of the 3 counted. Warping was not allowed in the contest. You can see that the top prize was $20, and I gave away default initials in the high score table, and there was free pizza for the top 10. Here are the results. The winner was Mark Cerny, who is here today. It's kind of dark, but stand up, Mark Cerny. Mark is responsible for me being here today. I saw Mark give a postmortem on Marble Madness 2 years ago, so thank you, Mark. And Mark is now the lead architect on the PS4, so I'm ready to buy one right now. I guess I can't yet. In February and March of 1983, the first field test was at the Galactic and One arcade in San Jose, about 50 miles south of here. Every day after work, I drove to the arcade and watched people play Crystal Castles. To have people play my game and pay real money 1 quarter at a time, that was just amazing and awesome. Here's the field recipe. Here come the field test results. Crystal Castles was number 3 in the first week, number 4 in the second, and number 5 in the third week. That wasn't quite good enough, but we got another chance. The earnings, the conclusions are that the earnings were okay, but we needed better and more interesting levels, and maybe some tuning and general improvements, whatever those are. We decided it would be great to have some new levels by a real artist, making them, not just me. And so here's some sketches by Dave Ralston, who made the new levels. Dave drew them on paper first, and then I would enter them using Fortran into the level generating system. This is one of the really good levels with 4 elevators, and it made it into the final game. Here's another level called the Crossroads from A Scene from Above. And here's a couple more top-down designs. We went out on another field test from April to May 1983. By coincidence, this was the same arcade where I had set the Centipede World Record. The results were much better. Crystal Castles was number 1 after 4 weeks, and that's what was needed to get to the game manufactured. It really helped that the earnings were steady for a while and didn't drop off quickly. 1 week later, there was another field test in Fresno. It did okay there too. After Fresno, Atari tested multiple machines all around the country. And look at this, they're building 5,000, amazing. I just saw this photo for the first time last week. So thank you, Lita, for getting me that photo. While they were building those, there were still work to be done. I had to work on foreign language versions and the sit-down version. And eventually about 7,000 Crystal Castles were manufactured. Let's review some of the innovations in Crystal Castles. My favorite hardware innovation is the flashing trackball. The ball is translucent and the light is underneath. The light is underneath even though it looks like the light is inside of the trackball. Crystal Castles was the first arcade game to combine sprites and a bitmap, and there was custom hardware by Sam Lee to handle the priorities between sprite pixels and bitmap pixels. That's what let you display the characters going behind walls and have it look realistic. There's hardware innovation behind the scenes as well, like Scott Fuller's custom chip to handle the trackball. The trackball itself was originally invented in 1952, 11 years before the invention of the mouse. Here's a diagram of the Crystal Castle flashing trackball from the owner's manual. You can see the light bulb at the very bottom. Crystal Castles had an ending which was controversial, believe it or not. There's a secret warp system that lets you do secret moves to warp to a higher level. And there's also a tunnel warp system that lets you warp close to the highest level achieved on the previous game. The initials of the current high score leader appear on the first maze, and initials of real people are baked into the shapes of some of the later mazes. There's random changes to the playfield on some of the levels. This was fun and added variety for the casual players, but it was considered unfair to the serious players because it introduced a luck factor in their attempts to maximize their score. I made very sure that nobody could get over 1 million points, and I still get asked, isn't there any way I can turn over this machine? And no, there is not. There's only room for 6 digits, and the code would break if anybody went over. The operator statistics system was used to control the colors of the mazes. So if a game had 1,000 games since it was installed, the colors would change all of a sudden. And then the next 1,000, you'd have different colors again. The ending gives bonus points depending on the game time and the player, depending on the game time of the player, and also the number of lives he has left. Atari decided to promote the secrets warps with these flyers. They explain how to do the secret warps. The secret warps are also explained by the game itself. If you play if you play high enough in the game without using secret warps, and this, so they really aren't secrets, but anyway, that's what they're called. My favorite real secret that's not in the flyers is that if you hold down the 2 jump buttons during attract mode, you eventually see the coin drop statistics, which really are only meant to be seen by the arcade operator. That's what allowed me to estimate how many coins were dropped into all the Crystal Castles. I would go from arcade to arcade and see how many coins had been dropped. By the way, there's a machine outside here. That's my personal Crystal Castle machine, and it's set to free play. When it's set to free play, this method of with the 2 buttons does not work, so sorry. Next, we're going to look at yet another video of Mark Alpiger playing Crystal Castles. Mark wrote a very detailed book on playing Crystal Castles, and it's available at classicarcadegaming.com. Mark had the world record in 1987 and taught the current world record holder, Frank Say. Frank's record is a remarkable achievement and has held up since 1988, even though there have been many attempts to try to break it. You can see all the world records of classic arcade games at the Twin Galaxies website.
Hello, everybody. This is Mark Alpiger of King of Kong and Crystal Castles fame. Perhaps some of you are familiar with me from those 2 sources. Franz, you might want to talk about the initials on this one, BBM, DES.
These are the baked-in initials. That's Brian McKee and Desiree McQuarrie from the arcades.
Got my life back. Shoot. A little too far back on that one.
Mark slipped up there and crashed into a gem meter.
Not going to get the witch this time.
Mark's on the last maze of level 9, and one maze away from the ending.
Makes it a little tougher, but let's see what we can do. The ball's kind of got trapped, so that worked out nicely. That's okay.
Mark missed the last gem, and so that's why he got upset.
Balls are very tricky on that one. Here we go, final screen.
Mark's using a relatively easy pattern to get through the final screen. The skeleton movement are random. The skeleton moves randomly, so it's not an exact pattern, but it works most of the time.
See ya. Unfortunately, I do not have perfect lives, but close. 60,000 is the maximum. My time bonus would be higher if I used the tunnel warp, which Franz can explain. 783 is an okay score playing it straight through. Unfortunately, the NV RAM reset on me. It's supposed to be non-volatile and last forever, but it didn't. So I lost my scores that were on here about 25 years, a couple of years ago. I'll let Franz explain this.
I guess I'd better explain it. I had very little memory left, so this ending animation was just a few lines of code.
It's a nice reward. And because I just got the top score, my initials form the top of the first maze here.
So a few more comments about the video. The NV RAM was actually not designed to last forever. It was designed to last about 5 years or something. So it actually lasted about 30. Well, actually, it's designed. It's complicated. I won't explain it now. All right, let's move on to the actual postmortem. We finally are at the postmortem. It's where we analyze what went right and what went wrong in a game project. It's 30 years later, but oh well. So here's my take for Crystal Castles. There's really not that much that went wrong with it. Looking back at it now, I think it would have been better to have some kind of cohesive storyline with cutscenes. The trackball controls limited sales. If the game had been designed to be played with a joystick from day one, the game might have sold better. There was an attempt to make a joystick version at the end of the project, but that version wasn't fun. There's a lot of art and code that's lost forever, including all the early field test levels. Here's what went right. The trackball control is unique and fun. The game is exciting but non-violent, which is hard to do. The graphics look was very good for 1983. Good-looking graphics are always a big plus. The warp system worked well and contributed to the high earnings. The endings was a good idea. It didn't affect earnings directly, but it gave to the game some notoriety. The game was tuned just right for beginners and for advanced players. A lot has happened in 30 years since the release of Crystal Castles. After Crystal Castles, I worked on Gremlins based on the movie Gremlins. Then in 1984, I quit my job. Why would I do such a thing? Well, Atari had this bonus program. The written bonus program expired, and management just said they would continue to pay bonuses, but they didn't want to make any written promises. Then there was 2600 Crystal Castles. I felt I should have had more say in how the 2600 version was developed. I thought that the 2600 version was too different from the arcade version, and but basically the 2600 just couldn't do Crystal Castles. In my 2 years of Atari, there were a lot of design disagreements with management over things like the ending and joystick versus trackball. The thing that irked me the most was that the very top executives didn't play video games, didn't like video games. They were just in it for the money. One day in the spring of 1984, I walked into my boss's office and said I wanted a written royalty plan or I'd quit. And that was really bad timing on my part and stupid. The response was very predictable. That was just a few months before massive layoffs in the summer of 1984. Here's some more details of why I both loved and hated Atari. At the end of the project, I was forced to program a joystick control for it. I knew that the game would play badly with the joystick at that point, but management didn't believe me, and so I had to do it. I put in some text near the end of the project. At the ending of the game, it said programmed by Franz Lanzinger, sort of as an Easter egg. When management found out, I got a memo saying that they would take away some of my bonus money, some unspecified amount of bonus money, if I didn't take out that message. I was greedy enough to just take it out. And soon after this incident, management caved and allowed real credits in coin-op games for everybody, not just me, of course. I had to write a long essay about why Crystal Castles should have an ending. And only after a lot of hemming and hawing and discussion did I get approval to let the game have an ending. It seems really bizarre at this point. In spite of all the problems, it was the best job ever. It was exciting and fun. I totally loved arcade games, and I spent hours every day playing the games. It was my dream job, and I'm still amazed that I was lucky enough to somehow get hired at Atari. The people there were great, are great, and I'm still friends with many of them. I went back to the real world, working as a software engineer outside of the game industry until 1989. But meanwhile, the games business came roaring back, and the NES was a big hit. Atari Coin-Op formed a subsidiary called Tengen to make ports of coin-op games for the NES. And guess what? The NES uses the 6502. And I still knew my load A and store A instructions. I worked on the NES version of Tubin and did Miss Pac-Man for the NES as a solo project. My Miss Pac-Man code was ported line by line to the Genesis and to the Super Nintendo after I left Tengen. That's right, I left pretty soon after I started Tengen as well. This time it's to go indie, and I went indie together with Dave Oriva, the best programmer I've ever worked with. We had a great time making games for the NES, and then later for the SNES and the Genesis. Here's some screenshots of some of the games we did. Here's a Rampart for the Super Nintendo using Mode 7. This is the beginnings of real-time 3D on the home consoles. In 1996, I formed another indie studio called Actual Entertainment, this time with Mark Robichek and Eric Jenner from the arcades way back. We developed a game called Gubble for the PC. Mark is retired, and Eric and I are still maintaining and developing the Gubble series 17 years later. Here's a screenshot from the iOS version of Gubble. I've been busy last year writing a book about game design. The book is about how to make classic video games using modern tools. The book uses Unity, Blender, GIMP, and Audacity. There are 7 step-by-step projects, and the book features some pretty interesting games in the classic style that you can experiment with. You can learn more about the book at the Mercury Learning booth in the expo area. I think it's booth 235. I also have some flyers up here if you want to come up later and pick up a flyer. You can find out more about the book. Meanwhile, Crystal Castles keeps going and going. There are, here's the 2600 version, and the 5200 version, that's more like it. The geometry is a little bit off, but pretty close. And then there's conversions. I haven't even seen most of these, and I haven't worked on any of the other Crystal Castles versions. The recent versions are emulations, so my old 6502 code is still being sold 30 years later. I'm not getting any monetary compensation or credit. My game, Gubble, has often been compared to Crystal Castles. Gubble was first released in 1996 for the PC. Here's a Gubble HD. There's a Gubble HD currently available at gubble.com, and Gubble for the iOS at the Apple App Store. And Gubble 3 was announced last year. Here's a quick comparison of Gubble and Crystal Castles. Gubble has 150 mazes, and Crystal Castles has 16 different maze designs. The mazes in Gubble are pre-rendered using 3D Studio. The mazes in Crystal Castles are rendered inside the game, 1 pixel at a time, using custom 6502 code. In Gubble, you use tools to remove nuts, bolts, screws, and nails, instead of just picking up gems. The theme and the characters are entirely different, but there's a similar graphic look to the mazes. This is the Game Developer Conference. I have I'll close with some unsolicited advice to game developers. The most important thing is to invent. Don't copy other people's game ideas too much. Invent your own ideas. Explore new directions. It's much more satisfying, and you'll have a better chance at success. Keep your long-term intellectual property if at all possible. You don't want my situation where all my games, except for the Gubble series, belong to other people. Fix your bugs before adding new features. And archive and back up everything. Take lots of photos and videos. And most important, have fun and live your life. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to ask the original team members to come up to the stage now. And if you could turn on the other mics, please. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Scott Fuller, and I'm not sure what my title was for Crystal Castles.
You were the project leader.
Project leader.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Barbara Singh, and I was an animator. I started at Atari as a pinball designer, and then moved to doing the animation. And I really loved that job. It was my best job ever.
Hi everyone, I'm Susan McBride, and I started my career at Atari, and Crystal Castles was one of my first projects, and I was an animator, artist, brought on to do animation.
Okay, I am John Ray, and I was the team manager. Difference between Scott had one project that he was focused on. Team managers usually had 3 or 4 projects, so these guys were all way more involved than I was in Crystal Castles.
Okay, so we're ready for questions.
Hi there. I just want to take a second and indulge me, if you will, Franz.
Sure.
This is a personal thank you to you. I was a young kid. I remember Crystal Castles in the arcade. Fell in love with it. I was probably 10, maybe 11. And then I got the privilege and honor of working with you at Actual Entertainment in 1995. So I want to extend you a personal thank you. It's an honor and privilege to know you and call you my friend. And I'd like to thank the rest of the folks up there with you for making a game that I will never forget. I have a question for you, and I can pick your brain kind of almost any time, but I figured this is a good one. What's interesting about Crystal Castles, and you mentioned a couple times in the presentation, is about the warps. And a lot of arcade games of that era didn't have necessarily, the only one I can remember off the top of my head is Tempest. But you have games like Donkey Kong today where people are, 30 years later trying to set world records, and they have to play all the way from, level 1 all the way up till the kill screen. So was that ever a consideration when you were developing the warps? That I believe you told me that you get more points for using the warps than not using the warps. So it's actually an advantage to use the warps rather than play all the way through.
Yeah, so my greedy motivation was I wanted the world record to be 5 minutes because I didn't want the world record people to tie up the machine too much.
Okay.
And so I gave them, so if you warp up to level 8, you get a whopping bonus, huge bonus that wipes out anything you might get if you play straight through. And I actually miscalculated, so the current world record is 40 minutes because if you start at level 2 and point press very carefully all the way up, you do slightly better by 10,000 points. So I blew it, but anyway, that's what happened.
All right, interesting. Thank you.
Oh, is this on? Oh, there. Yeah. Hi, my name is Panos Koutsianis, and I grew up in time zone also. I spent hours and hours and hours in time zone. And I do have a question, but I do remember when Crystal Castles came to time zone, there was a big line of them. And it was so overwhelming. It was so complicated. There was just so much happening on the screen that I was actually too afraid to play it.
Oh, my God.
And ever since then, I've actually gone ahead and started collecting a lot of arcade games. I've been to the house of various Atari corporate heads, and I've seen the binder that you're looking for, which is the project binder. Really? So I can actually give you help on that. And I also, where's the Marble Man guy, the Marble Madness guy? Hi.
Right there.
I actually have Marble Man, the Marble Madness 2, the arcade. There's only 2 of them, and I actually have one of them. And actually, you also have an Indy 800, the full one with the canopy. But anyways, we can talk about that. My question to you is, it's interesting that you've been in the business of gaming for you're running your own company as well as have seen that. And I'm actually interested in the corporate side of it and how you would, if you could make a comment and also give advice on running a business and seeing how it's changed, and if you could advise to people or just talk about the business of gaming and what you could say about it now versus then, or some advice on it.
You mean as an independent?
Yeah, as an independent.
The business is constantly changing, so I don't have very good advice. My own personal businesses, the Pitmasters was strictly contract. In my experience, contract is the way to go. Try to get a contract with the publisher. And that way you know that you're going to get paid. If you just make a game with your own money and then hope to make money with it later, that's very, very risky. So I wouldn't advise that unless you can handle it if you sell 10 copies.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. My name is John, and in the early 80s, I played at Space Shuttle Arcade, Galactican 1, Time Zone, Sunnyvale, Gothland. I always put that my high score initials were always ION. And at the time, I was just out of college, and I was moved to Silicon Valley, hoping, about 81, 82, hoping to get a job at Atari. I had a friend who worked there. He said he could get me in, and so I was an optimistic young kid, and I moved there, and obviously it's right as Atari was collapsing. And I ended up getting a job later in pinball design, being a pinball designer. But my question to you is, in this day and age, for usability and player testing, like I work currently for IGT, we do complex user focus groups and spend a lot of time with thinking, of watching the players from behind the one-way glass mirror. They know there's people behind, but they can't see us. How did you actually, when you got the game to a playable state, how did you do the usability and watching players and did you actually go out and observe the players play when it was on test, or how did you approach that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we had focus groups in-house, which I didn't really talk about. So once the game got almost ready for field tests, we would bring in arcade players that were interviewed at malls and brought in, and they were offered a small amount of money to come in and play the game. The developers were behind a two-way mirror or one-way mirror and would watch, and so we'd get feedback that way.
So this is similar to kind of what we're doing today. I was just curious because when I went to pinball in the late 80s and early 90s, we were very small companies with a whole staff of engineering of about 15 to 20 people, and we just basically put the games in the arcade and would show up there on a Friday night wearing a T-shirt and Levi's and pretend like that we would watch a player play for the first time. Obviously,
I'm sorry, we're running out of short on time.
Okay.
So if we can have just one more question.
How big was the music ROM?
How big was the music ROM?
Yeah, the ROM for the music.
The music didn't have its own ROM. It was as part of the program. So it was just data inside the program. The program was 24K, so it took up probably 1 or 2K of data, not very much.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.